Welcome to Inside WW2, your essential source for in-depth World War II history. We go beyond the timelines to explore the untold stories, key strategies, and personal accounts that shaped the greatest global conflict. If you're looking for high-quality, historically accurate content that truly brings the past to life, subscribe now and join us for the full story. The Red-Tail Angels, America's Double Victory. The sky over the Mediterranean was a canvas of impossible danger. Below, a formation of B-17 flying fortresses, heavy with bombs and dread, chugged toward their target deep inside Hitler's Europe. Above and around them, a diamond escort of P-51 Mustangs, their tails painted a brilliant, defiant red, sliced through the thin air. The pilots in the Mustangs, all African-American, were the 332nd Fighter Group, the infamous Red Tails. Suddenly, the bomber formation shuddered. An enemy attack! 3 sleek, terrifying Messerschmitt Me 262s, jet-powered, the cutting edge of Nazi technology, slashed through the escorts like silver daggers. The Me 262 was faster than any propeller-driven plane in the sky. It was supposed to be untouchable. But the Red Tails were not just any pilots. They were the product of a brutal, unforgiving experiment in Tuskegee, Alabama, trained to be twice as good just to be considered equal. First Lieutenant Roscoe Brown, his face grim, snapped his Mustang into a steep turn, pouring on the power. "Red Tail to leader, I've got one on my 6, brake left." His radio crackled with urgency. He saw the black smoke trail from a B-17 hit by the jet's cannons. He had to intercept. The Me 262 pilot, confident in his speed, made a deadly mistake, momentarily focusing on the fat, easy target of the bomber. That was all the margin Brown needed. He dove, using gravity to match the jet's speed, his 6.50 caliber machine guns singing a song of American defiance. The air filled with tracers. For a heartbeat, the jet pilot saw the crimson flash of a red-tail P-51 in his mirror. The color German pilots would soon learn to fear before Brown's rounds tore into his engine, sending the Me 262 spiraling to Earth. It was March 24, 1945, over the skies of Berlin, and the Tuskegee Airmen had done the impossible. They had shot down one of the most advanced fighters in the world, securing their place in history not just as skilled aviators, but as essential American heroes. They were fighting 2 wars at once, one against the enemy in the sky and another against the relentless, suffocating bigotry on the ground. This is the true, untold story of the Tuskegee Airmen, the pilots, the mechanics, the crew, and the leaders who achieved what a racist government never thought: the unfinished war. The war in Europe had ended, but for the Tuskegee Airmen, those who had returned, those still in training, and those supporting them, the Second War, the one against institutionalized racism, raged on with renewed ferocity. The phenomenal, undeniable success of the 332nd Fighter Group in the Mediterranean, the Red-Tail Angels, had provided the strongest possible argument against the Army Air Force's segregation policy. Yet the AAF establishment, deeply entrenched in Jim Crow tradition, had no intention of admitting defeat. The clearest evidence of this internal resistance lay in the fate of the 477th Bombardment Group Medium. Conceived as the second great experiment, this unit was intended to train African-American pilots and crew to fly twin-engine B-25 Mitchell bombers. If the black pilots could master the complex teamwork required for heavy bomber missions, the last vestiges of the 1925 War College report, which doubted black capacity for technical teamwork and leadership, would be destroyed.
However, the 477th was starved of resources, shifted repeatedly between segregated bases, Selfridge Field, Michigan, Godman Field, Kentucky, and ultimately Freeman Field, Indiana, and subjected to deliberate, systemic delays. Pilots who had successfully flown P-51s in combat were now sent back to the States only to sit idle, while the AAF dragged its feet on transition training and equipment delivery. The message was clear. The military high command, despite the 332nd's victories, still hoped the bomber unit would simply run out of time or money, proving the experiment too costly to continue. The men of the 477th, however, were not the generation that would wait patiently for equality. They were officers, college-educated, combat-trained veterans, and they knew the difference between military necessity and bureaucratic malice. The boiling point was reached not in a German sky, but in the heartland of America over something seemingly trivial, yet fundamentally vital to an officer's dignity: the Officers' Club. The Freeman Field Mutiny. In early 1945, the 477th Bombardment Group had been relocated to Freeman Army Airfield in Seymour, Indiana. Like every military base in America at the time, Freeman Field adhered strictly to the policy of racial segregation, a policy known as Army Regulation 21010. This meant two separate everything: separate housing, separate recreational facilities, and crucially, two separate officers' clubs. One club, the better-equipped one, was designated for rated personnel, i.e. pilots and bombardiers, who were all black in the 477th. The other, inferior club, was for non-rated personnel, largely administrative and training officers assigned to the base. However, the white base commander, Colonel Robert Selmay, circumvented this by suddenly issuing Base Regulation 85-2, which simply designated one club for white officers and the other for colored officers. It was a direct, cynical maneuver to maintain segregation. The black officers, led by their commander, Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., who had returned from combat in Italy, recognized the challenge for what it was: a deliberate attempt to enforce humiliation. It was a violation of their status as officers of the U.S. Army. The confrontation. On the night of April 5, 1945, in an organized act of nonviolent, calculated resistance, small groups of black officers, fully aware they were inviting arrest, attempted to enter the White Officers Club. One by one, they were blocked by white military police. The first officer to force his way in, Lieutenant Roger Terry, was arrested immediately. Over the next 2 nights, the planned protest escalated. In total, 101 African-American officers, including many decorated combat veterans, attempted to enter the club and were subsequently placed on house arrest in what became known as the Freeman Field Mutiny. The incident sent shockwaves through the War Department. To have over 100 U.S. officers arrested for insubordination at a time when the world was watching the final stages of the war was an unmitigated disaster for the military's public relations. Colonel Davis, Jr. himself was forced to order the men to stop the protest, but the damage was done. 19 of the officers were eventually charged, but most of the charges were dropped due to public pressure and legal scrutiny. However, Lieutenant Roger Terry was singled out and court-martialed for allegedly jostling a white officer. This legal battle drew the attention of the NAACP, who dispatched a young, dynamic lawyer named Thurgood Marshall, the future Supreme Court Justice, to advise the airmen's defense. Though Terry was convicted, a conviction later overturned, the mutiny achieved its primary goal. It exposed the blatant racism of the AAF to the nation and proved that these citizen soldiers were willing to risk their careers and freedom for their rights. The AAF was forced to disband the 477th and transfer its personnel. a clear sign that the experiment in segregation was becoming unsustainable. Homecoming and the End of Segregation, 1945 to 1948. As the war concluded, the Tuskegee Airmen returned home to a paradox that defied logic. They were heroes who had flown 1,578 combat missions, destroyed 112 enemy aircraft in the air, and earned a reputation as the most dedicated bomber escorts in the theater. The Red Tail Angels who never lost a bomber to enemy fighters on their long-range escort missions, a fact that has been debated and refined by historians, but whose symbolic and psychological power remains undisputed. Yet upon setting foot in the United States, they were forced back to the back of the bus, denied jobs, and blocked from housing in communities that welcomed their white counterparts. The strategic argument. The airmen's success provided President Harry Truman and the burgeoning civil rights movement with the ultimate strategic weapon. The AAF could no longer claim that black men lacked the competence for complex military roles. The low bomber loss rate proved the opposite. The segregated unit was more effective than the integrated units. The cost of maintaining two separate, fully equipped militaries, the duplication of training bases, officers' clubs, hospitals, and logistic systems became an unacceptable burden in the post-war peacetime budget. Racism was not just immoral, it was inefficient and expensive. This convergence of moral imperative and military practicality paved the way for the single most consequential reform in the history of the modern U.S. military. On July 26, 1948, President Harry Truman, driven by reports that highlighted the absurdity of a segregated military in an era of global competition, signed Executive Order 9981. It is hereby declared to be the policy of the President that there shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed services without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin. This policy shall be put into effect as rapidly as possible, having due regard to the time required to effectuate any necessary changes without impairing efficiency or morale. The Tuskegee Airmen had won their double victory. Their courage in the skies of Europe and their defiance on the ground at Freeman Field had not only helped defeat fascism abroad, but had also laid the foundational, undeniable proof necessary to shatter military segregation at home, paving the way for the wider civil rights movement that would follow. They had fought for the right to serve, and in so doing, they had fundamentally changed the America they served. The Congressional Gold Medal. The decades following Executive Order 9981 saw the Tuskegee Airmen disperse, blending into the integrated U.S. Air Force and civilian life, their immediate victories often overshadowed by the ongoing struggle of the civil rights movement. Their records, though impeccable, were often filed away, and the depth of their sacrifice, the double V they had fought for, was not fully understood by the next generation.
Yet their legacy continued to manifest in ways both subtle and profound. Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. went on to become the U.S. Air Force's first black general, and eventually its second four-star general. Daniel Chappie James, Jr. rose through the ranks to become the first black four-star general in the U.S. Armed Forces, a true testament to the foundation laid at Messerschmitt Field. Others achieved distinction in medicine, education, law, and politics, demonstrating conclusively that their talent was never confined to the cockpit. The story, however, needed to be told again, not just in history books, but as a formal recognition from the nation they saved and fundamentally changed. The final formation. Decades passed. The young pilots who had once hurtled through the skies of Italy were now venerable patriarchs. Then, in the early 21st century, a powerful movement gained traction to give the surviving airmen the formal honor they had long deserved. On March 29, 2007, the culmination of this effort took place when President George W. Bush awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor bestowed by the U.S. Congress, to the Tuskegee Airmen. In the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol, the surviving airmen, many frail but impeccably dressed, stood tall. The citation read, "The Tuskegee Airmen, for their unique military record, which inspired revolutionary reform in the armed forces." The moment was more than a medal presentation. It was a national apology and a profound validation of their entire struggle. They were finally recognized as not just a military unit, but as pioneers of integration and foundational figures in American civil rights history. Legacy in the Red Tail. Today, the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, the pilots, the navigators, the bombardiers, and the thousands of dedicated ground crew members is cemented in the American consciousness. The Red Tail is no longer just the identifier of a World War II fighter group. It is a symbol of courage in the face of prejudice, excellence under scrutiny, and the unwavering conviction that performance, not pigmentation, is the true measure of a person's worth. From the segregated, dusty fields of Alabama to the deadly skies over Berlin, the airmen achieved something extraordinary. They showed America the inherent flaw in its founding promise, and by their actions, they provided the map for its correction. They fought for the freedom of the world, and in so doing, won a piece of freedom for every American who would follow. Their victory stands as a timeless, amazing, and inspiring truth. The greatest barrier they broke was not the sound barrier, but the color barrier.
The most surprising facts about the Tuskegee Airmen. The "never lost a bomber" fact is a myth, but the reality is still incredible. The most popular claim about the Tuskegee Airmen is that they never lost a single bomber they escorted to enemy fighters. This statement, while a powerful symbol of their dedication, is historically inaccurate but reveals an even more amazing truth. The myth? The claim originated in media and military press releases stating the 332nd Fighter Group had lost 0 bombers to enemy fire. The reality? Air Force Historical Research Agency records confirmed that the 332nd Fighter Group did lose 27 bombers shot down by enemy aircraft during their escort missions. The amazing truth? The average loss rate for other 15th Air Force P-51 escort groups was 46 bombers. The Tuskegee Airmen's loss rate was significantly better than average, demonstrating their superior discipline in staying close to the bombers rather than breaking formation to chase German fighters. They were demonstrably one of the best. Their biggest act of resistance was not in the air, but in an officers' club. The most direct fight against Jim Crow occurred at Freeman Field, Indiana, as noted in Part 4, in an incident now known as the Freeman Field Mutiny. The incident? In April 1945, over 100 African-American officers, many of them decorated combat veterans, were arrested for civil disobedience after they repeatedly and deliberately attempted to integrate a segregated officers' club. The significance? It was the largest act of mass civil disobedience by officers in U.S. military history. The protest was a direct, calculated challenge to Army segregation policy, demonstrating the airmen's commitment to the double V: victory abroad, victory at home. They were the first to shoot down German jet fighters. The Tuskegee Airmen were at the forefront of the technological war, making history in the skies over Germany. The achievement? On March 24, 1945, during their longest escort mission to Berlin, pilots of the 332nd Fighter Group encountered the formidable, cutting-edge German Messerschmitt Me 262 jets, the world's first operational jet fighters. The victory? Pilots, including Lieutenant Roscoe Brown, successfully engaged and shot down 3 Me 262 jets that day, proving they could outmaneuver and defeat the enemy's fastest aircraft. The Tuskegee Airmen name is a post-war invention. The famous collective name they are known by today did not exist during World War II. During World War II, the men referred to themselves by their unit designations, such as the 99th Fighter Squadron or the 332nd Fighter Group. They were primarily known by their colorful nickname, the Red Tails or Red Tail Angels. The origin? The term Tuskegee Airmen was coined and popularized by author Charles E. Francis in his 1955 book on the unit, cementing the name in history long after the war. Their first commander was the son of the Army's only black general. The man who helped forge the airmen into an elite fighting force came from a lineage of military excellence, despite the institutional racism he faced. The officer, Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., commander of the 332nd Fighter Group, was the son of Benjamin O. Davis, Sr., who at the time was the U.S. Army's only black brigadier general. A West Point survivor, Davis, Jr. was a 1936 graduate of West Point. Due to a deliberate silent treatment campaign orchestrated by his white classmates, he never had a roommate, and no one spoke to him for all 4 years of his cadet experience. This level of perseverance was a prerequisite for what he achieved with the airmen. A Tuskegee Airman confronted Muammar Gaddafi. One airman's post-war career included a dramatic face-off with the future Libyan dictator. The airman, Daniel Chappie James Jr., a fighter pilot from the program, remained in the Integrated Air Force and rose to command Wheelus Air Force Base in Libya in 1969. The standoff? Following a coup by Colonel Muammar el-Gaddafi, Gaddafi drove a column of armed vehicles onto the base. General James personally confronted Gaddafi at the barrier, threatening him with his sidearm, forcing the dictator to back down, enabling the safe evacuation of American personnel and assets. James would later become the nation's first black 4-star general. The Tuskegee Airmen story is a powerful testament to competence, discipline, and courage both in the deadliest air battles of World War II and in the bitter fight for dignity on the American home front.